How's it going, everyone? I am Dylan. This is my cousin Carlo. This is All You Can Board. Today we're talking about some of our top surprises from in the board gaming world in 2022. We have not played a lot of games for 2022 yet. That's one of the reasons we're not doing our top 10 games of 2022 yet. We have tons of games on our shelf, tons of games we still want to buy that we think would probably crack that list. So we can't do it in good conscience quite yet. But there are some standout surprises. So I just want to preface this by saying there's probably even more surprises that we'll eventually discover as we play more games. This is based off the games we have played, some things that stuck out to us and things that we were already talking about, as we've discussed things from 2022, being like, yeah, that was shocking, or I didn't expect this, and we thought it would be a fun thing to sort of highlight. I think we have 5 of them in total here. Highlight some things that, stood out to us, that surprised us, some good, some bad, and you guys can weigh in and let us know if you agree with us, disagree with us, or what you think in general.
Yeah, and we're only talking about games that were actually released in 2022,
yes.
In North America specifically.
Exactly. So the first one I'm going to bring up is a game I recently covered in an Own It, Play It, Skip It, and it's a newer game that I purchased, and that is Evergreen. So Evergreen is on
components
here.
Just went everywhere.
Yeah, no kidding. So Evergreen is a game that I talked about in a new games video, and I wasn't anticipating a lot, and I was expecting to like it. The reason it's a surprise for me, and you can let me know if this lines up with you or if yours is a little bit different, is Photosynthesis is already a game I really like. So I wanted to get Evergreen for many of the same reasons I had wanted to originally get Photosynthesis, but I think there's a part of me that thought, I'm going to get Evergreen, I'm going to enjoy it, and then it's going to be like a Castle of Tuscany, Castle of Burgundy type thing where it's like, I'm never going to appreciate that the same way because of my experience with the first game, and both games aren't going to maybe live in my collection long term, and so I kind of had expectations, but I would say they're a little bit more muted just because I thought, well, yeah, I might like it, but I've seen this before. Mm-hmm. The surprise for me came in the fact that Evergreen is a game that I'm fairly certain I'm going to like over time, even the more I play it, more than Photosynthesis. I might keep both in my collection for a while because they do play pretty differently, which is kind of another surprise. There's a different aspect to them, but I didn't expect to like Evergreen as much as I did. There's a lot more games in 2022 I need to play, but I think that Evergreen has a decent chance of being a game that's like, well, definitely in the top 5 of my games from 2022, and maybe it ends up being like a top 3 game from 2022. Like, I've really enjoyed both plays. I played it at 2 and 3. I thought both were solid, and it shocked me how satisfying it was to play with the components, how nice the game was overall, and how it found a way to differentiate itself from Photosynthesis. So, yeah.
No, I agree. Honestly, it came as a pretty big surprise to me too. I don't own Photosynthesis. I haven't, and I don't like it quite as much as you. But I've had every time we've played Photosynthesis in the past, I really enjoyed it. But haven't had that kind of like when I see it on your shelf when we come over to game, I haven't had that burning desire to say like let's play it again. Yeah. And when I heard about Evergreen, I saw the box, saw all the artwork components. I was reading about it. I also thought it was going to be way more similar, and I almost felt when you told me you bought it at first there was like a oh no kind of feeling because I thought it was going to be so similar, and then when you showed it to me and we played it, I had this feeling of like this might be better than Photosynthesis. And even if you said, like you said, even if you do end up getting rid of one or the other, I would bet that you're more likely to keep this than Photosynthesis, even if you're close on your opinion of both, just because this one is going to land with more people. Like this will be easier to show other people and be more inviting. Yeah. Whereas I feel like Photosynthesis has a higher chance of being maybe too mean for some people or whatnot. This one just feels a little more like polished, which you mentioned when you reviewed it. It just feels like they've really taken their time to develop everything well, and it's just
Yeah, I think I expected there to be polished based on like things I had seen about the components, but I still didn't expect it to be as satisfying to play with all the components and with the dual layer player board and how everything fits together. And I wasn't as convinced that they were going to find a way to take this formula from Photosynthesis and say we're going to repackage this and it's going to feel like it carves its own spot, and it is different enough, and even different enough that you could own both and it wouldn't be ridiculous. I could have both, and I could see the two situations I'd want to bring each one out in.
Yeah, and it's because if you were to ask someone like, hey, give me a couple sentence recap of what you do in Evergreen versus Photosynthesis, the recap would be almost identical. Yeah. Oh, the trees block all that stuff is almost the same. So you're like, so what's different about them? And then you play them and they're like very different games
one is
somehow have that common thread red still. Yeah.
Evergreen is your focus on your own player board, and the cards is what is causing you to have player interaction. Whereas in photosynthesis, where you're actually placing the trees and the light and everything is where everyone is placing. So it becomes more competitive for space that way. And yet somehow,
but you don't lose all the even though they say, hey, you're going on your own board now, we're not fighting in this thing. Like, I would have expected that to lose way more of the interaction, and it's maybe a little less interactive than photosynthesis.
But not by much.
Not by much, and in a way that I think works really well, because of, you don't want people messing with you the entire game when you're trying to plan for these scoring conditions and stuff. Like, it just strikes that balance really well.
Yeah, surprise hit, Evergreen for me, and I think for both of us in different ways, and can't wait to play it more and see exactly where it lands.
Yeah, I especially want to try it with 4 players.
Yeah, me too. That's Evergreen, our first surprise.
Yep. Okay, now I'm going to talk. So one of my biggest surprises of the year, and this was an unfortunate surprise. This has so far been a bit disappointing. That is Fire and Stone. So this is from Pegasus Spiel. This is designed by Klaus-Jürgen Wrede, who designed Carcassonne, which was my gateway game, one of still my favorite games of all time, especially as a 2-player game. We did get this sent to us as a review copy from Pegasus Spiel. This was actually when we did our top anticipated, most anticipated games for 2021, or I guess it would have been for 2022. This was, I think, my number 2 or 3 most anticipated game. Not only because of the pedigree of the designer and the fact that he was responsible for Carcassonne, but I had read through the entire rulebook before we did that most anticipated games video. And the game had a lot of promise. The rules sounded so interesting to me. This game where you are basically spreading out over the map. It's sort of like there's these hidden tokens that are face down, and you're kind of exploring. And when you get to a spot, you get to flip over the token and see what's there. You can discover campfires. You can find, you can get like animals to cook. You can find little like berries and things to collect that lead to little upgrades on your board. You can find, I'm forgetting what else you can find now. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do throughout the game though. And there's like, you can cook, when you cook animals at a fire, you go back to a certain spot on the map, and as the game goes on, you can reach new parts of the map that weren't accessible before. As the game goes on, there's these like cave tiles. Like every game, there's one single cave, and no one knows where it is at first. And once you discover the cave, it reveals this kind of unique ability, and there's a big deck of these cave cards. All these things sounded interesting, and we've played the game twice so far with 2 players and with 3 players. And I'll just say right now, like, this is definitely by no means an official review or final thoughts. Like, we will be covering this probably in an Own It, Play It, or Skip It video on the channel in the next, hopefully, couple months. Yep. But so far, it has felt like all the things to me that sounded promising or interesting fell short of what my expectations were, whether it's the caves, whether it's the flipping over the tokens, whether it's the things that you're collecting that have the Bonanza style, where you're trying to collect multiple of these to get these rewards. Like, everything just felt like, oh, I was expecting a little more from that. And I think the reason why it shocked me is that, so Pegasus Spiel, we like a lot of their games. Like, we've reviewed both the first micro macro games on the channel. Yep. We recently played Hansa Teutonica, which made it into my top 10. And so like, and they do a lot of balance. Like, Hansa Teutonica is not a family game. Micro Macro is. This is a family game. This was my most anticipated game from Pegasus Spiel of the year. Yep. And we're going to talk about 2 other games shortly. One associated with this, and one is one of your surprises. Yep. That actually, as a family game, surprised me, and I like those both more than Fire and Stone so far. Yeah, and this is just weird because it feels like, who is this game being marketed to? Because as a family game, I feel like the theme and artwork aren't super exciting if you're like playing parents and kids together, but it doesn't feel like a sort of like gamer's game. It feels like the mechanics of it are made to be a family game, but the theme isn't. So it sits in this weird spot.
The theme matches the aspect of like discovery, like you know, like early ages of the world and stuff like that, and discovering things like that. I understand, but I hear what you're saying. Like,
but maybe they need to go with a more cartoonish artwork then, or something.
Yeah, instead of it,
like the way it looks in like Endless Winter or something, you know?
Yeah, I think you're right, and especially after the family is like the target. Yeah. For me, I just like. The biggest thing, and this is like might seem like vague or generalized, but like it's important for board games, is I didn't leave any of the games I played of Fire and Stone feeling like super excited by the experience, or like that there was moments where I was having tons of fun. Mm-hmm. And that's like obviously what you look for when you're playing games, and it just didn't have that. And one of the biggest standout things for me that I remember, I said it both times we played, that just seemed odd to me, and you're gonna have to fill in a couple of gaps here if you remember, because it's been a while since I played for the exact rules. But when it comes to the majority, with having your the little huts or whatever, right, and like it becomes like a bit of an area control type thing of like whoever has the most huts, like will get the points associated. That where those were gonna take place was very random based on what tiles got flipped. Like you couldn't just be like, I'm going to go and place one here. You had to have, there's specific conditions where you could place these huts, and it meant that it ended up being less competitive and interesting to compete for spots. And also your private objective like was also kind of like random depending on where things flipped out. Like there was less planning, more luck in that sense, that I like more unsatisfying luck than I was expecting. And just like for how much discovery should be fun and should be this thing of like, what's under here, it never really, there's some moments where you flip something over and you're like, oh, that is a big deal, but it just felt like a lot of it was just like, and there's that under there. And
it's like these little incremental, like you flip, you're like, oh, cool, I'll collect this. And then you're like, oh, okay. But like you said, there's no big turns, there's no exciting moments in the game. It's just this like slow build, and then ends and you count points, and you just kind of feel like, I don't know, I was just expecting more from it.
And the cave card, I think, and this, I don't want to get too specific, but like the cave card, in my opinion, those cards need to be like drastic.
Yeah, well, that was the thing that excited me most about the game, and that so far has been the biggest letdown. I looked through a couple of the other ones, but I tried not to look through too many because I want them to be a surprise when they come up in the game. But again, we will play a lot more of this, and especially at 4, because I can imagine that 4 is probably the best player count. So again, by no means final thoughts on this or anything, but on this note, I want to really quickly mention, because there was a game that at the time that I got this game, and when I was talking about it as most anticipated or whatever, there were 2 other games from Pegasus Spiel, one in particular that I'm going to talk about, that I didn't even know existed at the time. Found out about this one recently, picked it up. I've only played the solo mode, which is definitely not even going to be where it's best, and this already I like more than Fire and Stone, and it's from the same company, Pegasus Spiel, and that is First Rat. So this is another kind of family weight game. And this is the same entry in my surprise thing. Check the timestamp below. We're not talking about a separate surprise, but because I've only played this once. But theme and gameplay, like right away, as a family weight game, if you just look at these boxes, what like excites you more to play with your kids, or if your kids to play with your parents? Like, no doubt it's the game where you're a rat building a rocket ship out of scrap pieces at the scrapyard, going to fly to the cheese moon. Like, of course this theme is going to be more exciting. And then the gameplay itself, even as a solo game where you're just activating one single bot, was way more interesting. So I'm not going to get too into the mechanics of this or anything, because again, I've only played it once. We'll play it a bunch more. We'll cover this in a review on the channel. But me playing this recently made me even more surprised by Fire and Stone and my impressions of it. So we're going to play more of these and cover them both in the channel. And I know this is sort of a 2-in-1 slot here, but I'll leave it at that. Is there anything you want to add about this one? I know you haven't had a chance to try First Rat yet.
No, I think I've covered it all. Yeah, it's a surprise. I think the biggest part of the surprise is that for a game that was number 2 on your list,
of most anticipated,
to quickly be replaced by a game that like First Rat, that wasn't even really on our radar in a big way, right?
And I would say so far I like First Rat like a lot more than Fire and Stone, and there's another family weight game from Pegasus that I also like a lot more than Fire and Stone so far, which Dylan is going to talk about
which
right
is my surprise, and that is a game called Fyfe. So this is our other big surprise for 2022. Positive surprise with this one. This is a really simple family weight game that and we requested a review copy for this, and we're sent one, and thanks to Pegasus Spiel for sending this. The main reason I wanted to play it was it looked beautiful, like the colors, the artwork, the board, and the fact that it's dual layered, and the way you insert these pieces. Like, I was just like, hey, like at the very least, having a family weight game that's this beautiful, I could see opportunities to get to this table. I'd be curious to see if the gameplay holds up. I think I came in with expectations that were painted a little bit by games that we had recently played in the family weight genre, like Savannah Park, which I like Savannah Park, and I played it multiple times with people that also ended up liking it, but I never left a session of Savannah Park being like, I'll ever suggest that, or that like it really resonated for me in a big way. So I kind of had that same expectation with Fyfe, and I've compared the 2 games a lot. Fyfe, for some reason, for a game that is just about placing, you have 2 options of tiles that you can choose from, and you're replacing whichever one you place. You just have to place on your board somewhere, but they come in 5 different symbols and 5 different numbers and 5 different colors, and there's different combinations that it'll end up in. And you have these objectives that you have to slot into these different insets on the side of your board to determine how that horizontal, diagonal line, horizontal line, or vertical line, or what I think I did that in the reverse, how each of those is going to score. And so you're going to score different rows, different columns, and everything differently every game you play, depending where you insert those objectives. So you have to kind of say, where am I going to place these tiles to, get those points? Or after I've placed these certain amount of tiles, what can I still score that I haven't placed yet, so that I don't like lose a bunch of progress I've done? And then you slot that in. Sometimes you're required to slot those objectives in. Sometimes you don't have to, depending where you place your tiles. And there's a bit of a race because the first person to complete an objective from everyone at the table gets bonus points. So even though there's not a lot of player interaction because everyone's working on their own board, that race element and seeing how close everyone is a big deal, and the bonus points do end up mattering in the final score. So that whole combination of everything somehow works. It feels satisfying. It's different enough every game. It is endlessly satisfying to take the pieces feel really, really good, and putting them into your board and just like everything looking as beautiful as it does. It's a combination of all those things that just made Fyfe one of the underdog surprises of 2022, because this is not a game, like this was not my top 50 of all time or either of ours. Like it's not a game that's going to be one of our favorites of all time. And yet I could see this, and I think I said this before, I think I said it when I reviewed it and when I played Skip It, as a game that gets played a lot in our collection just because it's really easy to play with almost any group of people. And the first time I introduced this to two of my friends that don't play board games all that often, it was a huge hit. And it reminded me that like, there are people out there that if they don't play a lot of board games, they play one like this. It's wild to them. Like the amount of decision making.
Well,
right?
it feels like I think we talked about this before too. This feels like something that could have been an app or like some online puzzle game that you get addicted to playing. The way that you're just like moving things around, like there's something kind of traditional and old school feel about it, but it has this really kind of newer, really vibrant presentation and the artwork and stuff. And I really like how early on you get the feeling of kind of a relaxing, easygoing like family weight game in the first like half or even 2/3, 3/4 of the game kind of thing. And then at the end you feel a bit of this squeeze where you're like, oh shoot, I really have fewer options, or if I put something here, I'm not gonna score any points for this tile. But it still works for a family game, so it's not the same feeling all the way through, but it's also not punishing the whole time. It just, it does a really good thing with that game arc. I really like it. And it feels like Calico with the conditions with the colors and the symbols on them and stuff.
And I didn't even mention your favorite part, or I think you've said it's your favorite part, which is the seashells, the powers, right?
Yeah,
like,
I do like those a lot.
The fact that like you get all those points, like you start the game with all the points from the seashells. Each seashell is worth a certain amount of points. You will score those at the end of the game, but every time you use a seashell, you're abandoning those points. So something that's a really powerful ability might lose you 6 points for using it. So you have to weigh, how badly do I want that? How much do I want to do that to be able to gain more points by it allowing me to like move tiles on my board or whatever. And it plays up to 5, which for a game that has simultaneous play is a big deal, because it's not really slowing down the game all that much, maybe like marginally, but it's allowing for like a family that now has 3 kids can play this game.
That's what I was gonna say. A lot of family games cap out at 4, so like people underestimate the value of having a family game play up to a 5th player, because there are a lot of families out there with 3 kids, right? Or one parent and 4 kids or whatnot, right? So
it might be the biggest underdog surprise from 2022. I think it is for me. Like I don't know another game that I went in with such like really no expectations, just aside from it's beautiful.
I think the way I think of games like this is, if we didn't have a YouTube channel and we weren't reviewing games, if we were just like average gamers, like we would have probably never played this, because like we would have never been interested enough to, you know, stop playing our favorite games to stop and check something out like this. But it's been a really, really big surprise, especially I'm pretty sure it's a first time designer too, and that's another thing. It's like first time designer, family weight game, another one of these kind of sand beach themes. You're like, how much interesting stuff is there going to be? But like, it's a solid game.
That is Fyfe. Our third surprise from 2022.
Yeah, third surprise. Okay, our fourth surprise from 2022. And this, I guess, technically, if you look on BGG, it's marked as a 2021 release, but it was only released in Europe at the very end of 2021.
This might be a controversial one. This might
I think it is. Well, I mean, here's the we have some people might agree with one of the reasons we're surprised. Anyways. Should we keep it off camera a while longer?
I think I can already see it on camera.
That is Ark Nova. And quick special shout out, because I don't think we mentioned this in one of our videos. I think he wanted to remain anonymous, but shout out to one of our patrons. I won't name his name because I think he wanted to remain anonymous, but for sending us this game along with another one recently. We really appreciate that.
Amazing.
It's obviously not an inexpensive game, but it has given us the ability to cover it on the channel. So we've spoken about this a couple times in other videos. If you want to go look back on our thoughts, there was one we talked about when we went to a cabin together and we played it with 2 players. And I also mentioned a different solo games video where I played, I think, 6 solo games at a cabin. So I played the solo with 2 players only, haven't played it with 3 or 4. The biggest surprise first, there's a couple things that surprised me about Ark Nova in 2022. The biggest surprise for sure, and the reason why I chose it for this list, or we chose it, is the fact that this game shot up the BGG rankings as quickly as it did and got as high as it did. we've been in the hobby for a long time. The first however many years I was in the hobby, I didn't really use Board Game Geek a lot. So I'm not one of those people who've always been looking at the rankings. So maybe for other people this isn't as much of a shock, but as like from what I can remember, since I've been monitoring BGG and looking at stuff closely, even especially since we've started the channel a few years ago, I've never seen a game shoot up the list this high this quickly. While it's like, I think it was in the top 50 when the game, like within like 2 months of the game's release or something, or 3 months, like absolutely ridiculous. And I remember there was a point right around whatever, I think it was Essen, where, you know, when they had announced the new games and they're asking people what they're most excited for, and you see the BGG top, the hot games, all goes up to unreleased games. There's that part of the year near the end of the year. And I remember this and Bitoku were the two big games that like everyone was talking about. And for some reason, I wasn't particularly interested in either one, and I remember thinking, I don't think either one is going to be all that successful necessarily. I was wrong about Ark Nova. People were asking me like, aren't you super excited? It's like terraforming Mars and like look at the rulebook and all this stuff, and I was like, nothing about the game excited me all that much. It seemed like a really long, like big rulebook, first time designer, the comparisons to terraforming Mars, which I don't really love, and all this stuff. And then I ended up playing it solo, and I was a bit surprised because I did enjoy it more than I expected on that first play solo, but maybe that was part of the feeling of like, hey, here's this big game, and I'm at a cabin by myself playing the solo game, and there was a good feeling about kind of like conquering this game, learning this game on my own and playing it solo, and there's a lot of cool stuff in the game. But then when I showed it to you, we played it as a 2-player game, I enjoyed it a lot less than the solo play, so that also surprised me. So the surprise is not only how quickly it shot up the ranks, but it's also the surprise of the difference in my enjoyment from the two plays, and the fact that like, how is this number 4 right now on the top games of all time? Like I understand there's a lot of things to like, and I know we need to play it a lot more still, but I'm just surprised at the difference between the general public's opinion and our opinion on this so far.
Yeah, and to be fair, like neither of us have played this enough to have a definitive opinion. Like it's not us saying we're surprised, we think it's a bad game or we think it's a good game or whatever. Like we can't really make that verdict right now.
It's at least, well, I'll say it's at least good minimum.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
and definitely better than good. We just don't know where in that range yet. Kind of thing.
This is not about like Ark Nova is a bad game and that surprised us. The surprise for me is just that like it's not that the Board Game Geek list needs to be like, oh, if it's a game that's in the top 10, clearly I'm gonna like it. Like that's not what I'm saying. But for a game to be if it is truly the quickest rising game to ever get into the top 5, and it's now sitting at number 4, and it's been out for like a year and a bit or whatever it is, like that, all that should be a formula that playing the game shouldn't have like left me with a slightly disappointed feeling, because all that is going to create hype. It's impossible for that not to. And I think the combination of it rising, and I think a lot of it rising was probably that Tom Bassel put it as the number 1 game
of all time. Yeah, someone who's been reviewing games for like decades, putting it ahead of games that have been staples of his for so long. And there's a lot of other people who have put it in their number 1 or in their top 10 of all time already too, right? We've seen it a lot.
So I feel like the combination of all that had it rise. Like all of that hype is going to create expectations. And I guess there was part of me that thought, it's going to live up to those, because look at all these reasons. Like it's going to live up to the expectations, even if it's not my favorite game of all time. I'm going to play it and be like, wow, yeah, this is a phenomenal game. And I just didn't have that. I thought it was good. I thought there was a lot of things I liked about it, but I don't, in a personal opinion, I just don't see how a game that's this new can be the number 4 game of all time based on what I've played of it. But at the same time, if with the comparisons to Terraforming Mars, I like Terraforming Mars. I've never played that game and had the experience that some people have with it. Like where I think Terraforming Mars at one point was like number 2 or 3, and it still is like super high on the list.
Yeah, I think it's in the top 10 somewhere. But.
Yeah, so the surprise is that you're right. It's the combination of how quickly it rose, and then playing it and realizing maybe it was impossible to live up to that hype, but I was expecting it to somehow live up to it on some level, right? So. Need to play it more for sure, but I don't think I'm ever going to play it and be like, okay, I see now why it's number 4 of all time. It's
right.
We're gonna always be the outliers, if maybe not the only outliers, but like in terms of the general consensus, it seems like this is gonna be one of those ones that we just have different opinion than the general public.
Another thing I want to point out real quick that is a surprise about this game is because of all the comparisons to Terraforming Mars, I expected to feel more similarly as I do to Terraforming Mars, but in Terraforming Mars, I can't think of anything in that game that I like love, and there are things that I like, it's kind of more like middling across the pack. Ark Nova has 2 or 3 things that I like absolutely love.
Right.
Some of them I haven't seen in other games, but then there's other things that just like drive me crazy about it, that make me feel like it's such a missed opportunity. And I guess I sort of feel so far about it that it needed more time, like more playtesting, more development. It's a massive deck of over 200 cards. So many of the cards that I've seen so far are either just like uninteresting or pretty similar to another card. And like ultimately a game like this will usually live and die by, like if it's a card-based game, almost all your ways you're getting points. Like you have to be playing cards, you're digging through a giant deck for cards. If that deck of cards doesn't work, or there are cards that are not interesting, or there's something off about it, that has the potential to like really detract from the experience. And I think that's what happened to me in that second game. Is I think the kind of like rose-colored glasses were on a bit for the first game, and I was like, whoa, this is cool, whoa, this is cool. And I was getting all those kind of endorphin rushes. And then in the second game, once I knew what I was doing, I think I was bumping up against all these things that were frustrating me a little more. And I still really enjoy like the scoring track and the way that works, and the action selection system, rotating things and upgrading your actions. Like those things are just amazing and really fun, but there's so many other things that get in the way of me really enjoying the game as a whole.
Yeah.
So
I'll be really interested to see in like, 4 or 5 years time, like really removed from when this came out, and by the time then have expansions of stuff have come out. I'll be interested to see, not on the board game geek list where it is, but just on people's general like top 50 of all time, top 10 games of all time. I'm just curious where it does, how much does it show up? Because that I think that'll be more of a testament than like what the ranking is on Board Game Geek. Just like how many people are actually still talking about it regularly, or does an expansion come out that all of a sudden like makes it like this is the definitive way to play it, and that changes people's opinion.
Right.
Like, I'm just curious how this game evolves.
Yeah, and you know what? Something I want to mention also about the BGG rankings is that they're obviously skewed towards heavier games. We've talked about this before, because let's talk about a very light game and a heavy game, for example. People who aren't interested in Ark Nova, or people who don't play a lot of board games or whatever, aren't gonna go try this at a convention, some 2 to 3 hour game, and then go online to BGG and give it a negative rating. So a lot of the ratings are people who are already interested in the game and who are used to playing heavier games. So it tends to lean towards this bias of it's going to be played by people who are expecting to like it a lot more. Whereas lighter games, you might have thousands of heavyweight gamers who go to these conventions, try this 10-minute light game and go rate it a 6. So there's more people who don't like the game who are actually having the chance to play it and rate it. So the ratings get skewed, and I think that's why this is so high up too. Is like there's a lot of people who, if they played it, wouldn't love it, but people who like 3-hour games are liking this a lot. So I don't know.
That is our fourth surprise.
We'll have a lot more to say on that. We're going to do an actual full-length review on the channel at some point, but we just need to play it a lot more and across player counts. So, but yeah, that is Ark Nova.
All right, our last surprise from 2022 is a little game called Caesar Sees Rome in 20 Minutes.
We've spoken about this in 1 or 2 videos at this point in the past 6 months,
come up
right?
a lot, and I think that's because it's come up a lot because we both love it, and that is the biggest surprise. And one of the reasons, it's not just, we didn't expect to like this much and we did. It's also that a game that has a war theme in general is always going to have a bit of an uphill battle with us, because it's not something we gravitate towards as a theme. And in general, I would say theme does, it's not that theme plays a huge role for me in whether I'm going to like or dislike a game, but like using like Battleline as an example, so much of I think about my enjoyment of that is unfortunately because of like the artwork and the theme and stuff. And Caesar had much of the same problem, me coming in, is like I got it mostly because I had heard so much good stuff about it. I like 2-player only games, and I thought, I've heard there's I'm placing an order anyways. It's not that very expensive. Let's add it on and let's see what the fuss is all about. More to be able to review it and say I played it, less to be like, this is going to be a game that stays in my collection.
Yeah, not quite at the same extent of Fyfe, but another one that if we didn't run a YouTube channel, we might have missed this because of the war theme. Like I wouldn't have been looking into buying this game.
Yeah, and then this not only was this on my top 50 of all time, it's one of my favorite 2-player games of all time right now, and that's because it is just a really solid 2-player game. And really quickly before I get your thoughts on it, the other co-surprise with this is I think this is just the point where I started to realize, and maybe you did too, or maybe it was a different game for you, how much I love Paulo Mori as a designer. Like if Paulo Mori, between this, Ethnos, and Libertalia, those are 3 of my favorite, in all my top 50, 3 of my favorite games. we talk about Uwe Rosenberg a lot. We talk about Rainer Knizia a lot. Suddenly, out of even Tom Lehman for you, like suddenly out of nowhere, Paolo Mori is now on my list of favorite designers, and I'm going to be very eager anytime another game's coming out to play it. Like
well, and Dogs of War is another one of his, is one of my Grail games that I've been dying to try for a long time, and he hasn't been around anywhere near as long as Knizia and Rosenberg. So maybe not not to say you were comparing them, but I was going to say it's not. I don't want to lump them into the same category or anything, but this has been a huge surprise for me too, for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. The fact that it's the kind of war theme, and there's so many 2-player games out there, and there's always more 2-player games being released every year, and a lot of them come out and you go like, oh, that's good, but it's like we play so many, and a lot of the ones that we've covered on the channel, like even thinking about something like Sobek 2 Players, like not a comparable game, it's a 2-player game that came out recently. That's all the comparison is here. Is that a lot of the time we cover these games and we say it's a really good 2-player game, but there's already so many good 2-player games that we play that it's not going to crack into that echelon of my top ones. Like I said the same thing about Paris, La Cité de la Lumière, when we covered it. Like amazing 2-player game, but is it going to crack into that upper echelon of games? And like this is one of those rare ones, along with like Great Plains and Mandala, those rare kind of 2-player games over the last few years that are like, actually, yes, one of my old 2-player favorites might leave my collection now because this has actually jumped into there. And I really did not expect that from this game. And even the kind of Roman Caesar theme, like we had, not that that's necessarily like an off-putting theme for me, but any games that I've played that have had that theme, like I think of Forum Trajanum by Stefan Feld, that one felt kind of flat for me. So, and what you said about theme, like not that the theme should determine everything, but like we do live in a day and age where there are over 1,000 new board game releases worldwide every single year. Like we're spoiled as gamers. We should have the right to pick themes that appeal to us. So like if a war theme doesn't appeal to you, you shouldn't. That should be fine. You should be able to go look for other games, but that speaks extra highly to how big of a surprise this was.
Yeah, agreed. So, it's a phenomenal game. If you haven't played it, I would highly recommend checking it out. This makes me want to play Blitzkrieg even more, just because I know they're similar. I don't know the rules for Blitzkrieg, so I don't know how similar, but I've heard them compared a lot. That came before Caesar, so I'm very.
I might pick that one up at some point, or maybe we'll try it at a cafe if we can find a copy or something.
That's even more of a straight war theme, I think, than Caesar.
Yeah, I think so.
But regardless, it's just big positive surprise in not only the game but also the designer for both of us, and I'm really interested to see what he designs next and how long this game, or how much this game climbs on my lists as we go forward and as I play it more, because this is us talking about it, having played it. I think I've played, well, technically we've done best of three every time, so I've played it a bunch, but I feel like in many ways we've still only scratched the surface.
There's all kinds of strategies we've thought of during the game, been like, next time I'll try this, I'll try this. So,
exactly. Great game.
Awesome game.
Those are 5 surprises, positive and negative. I shouldn't say negative, but like, less positive from 2022. Let us know in the comments what you think about the ones we picked here, if you agree or disagree with how we've thought about these games and our experiences from last year. And I would absolutely love to hear what your surprises are from last year, because there's so many games we haven't played, and there's so many things that can surprise people for different reasons than us. I'm just really curious to find like the games that hit that you didn't expect to, or the games that you were super anticipating and then realize, oh, this is actually just like an okay game or whatever. Let us know in the comments. We'd love to be able to talk to you in there and just hear what your surprises were from last year. So otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.